Namaskar, and welcome once again to bOOkaholics Live Talk. Today we have with us Amal Chatterjee, senior course tutor from University of Oxford. Uh, he is a senior course tutor on creative writing and academic writing, and besides that, he is also a published novelist. His novel's name is Across the Lakes, and apart from the novel, he also has edited books like Representation of India during the 1740s to 1840s, and also a book called Writers on Writing. We also have with us Navin Chhetri, a Nepali poet based in Aberdeen. He is an MSc in creative writing from Oxford University, specializing in prose and poetry. He has already got an anthology published, and it's called Bini. And his forthcoming anthology is going to be published in 2023. It's called I Father. So the main reason for having them here is that bOOkaholics, in collaboration with Mist and Mountain, is conducting a 2 days writing retreat at Nagarkot in the month of June, tentatively from June 2nd to June 4th. And we thought, like since writing, since many of us are novice writers, we've just begun writing, we're interested in writing, there are many students of literature, and bOOkaholics itself is a platform that is full of writers and readers, and there might be many writers who want to publish their own works. And also, what does it take to become a writer? Is it because just because we have no dearth for vocabulary or we are good at expressing ourselves does not mean that we are capable of writing something. So we bring to you the first speaker, Amal Chatterjee. He'll be speaking for around 30 minutes. After that, we'll have our second speaker, Navin Chhetri, and then the floor will be open for the viewers. You can put up your questions. You can, just note down what they are saying. Hello, Amal. Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome to bOOkaholics.
Namaskar.
And thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a great pleasure.
I've just given a brief introduction about yourself, and the floor is yours. I've already explained to you. So it's up to you, whatever you want to take it, whichever way. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming and for viewing this. As Saguna has very kindly explained, we're going to be, I'll be talking a little bit about the workshops that we'll be conducting, and about creative writing in general, about how people can find things to write about and what we write about. So we're doing a 2-day workshop. So we'll be staying together, and it's an opportunity. I mean, Navin and I were talking about this, and one of the great opportunities of 2-day workshops or multi-day workshops is you get the opportunity to write, to discover ideas, to discover what you want to write about, to think about those ideas and to develop them in a community, in a group of people who are equally interested in writing, and then to spend time talking about writing, considering them as we do that over the evenings, in the afternoon, and into the following day. Because it's very rare that we get people get the opportunity to spend extended amounts of time with other writers, and we often have, and I'm sure all of you are readers, we often have time to read or to, sorry, I beg your pardon, we often have time to talk to other readers. But writers are, by definition, writing is often seen as quite a solitary thing, and we do it on our own. However, we get inspiration from other people, we bounce off other people, we learn from other people, and we are able to share. And a 2-day workshop allows you to go away. It's like it is a retreat. And if you think about, I mean, of course, we're used to going away for meditation, spending time on meditation retreats, and this is a similar thing. It gives time for your creative ideas to come forward, to build, to develop them, and to give them form. I realize that for many people who think, okay, well, writing a story, I've never written a story. I mean, where am I going to find them? We'll have a conversation a little earlier. I don't know where I'm going to find these characters from. Where do these characters come from? How do I tell stories? Is it actually possible for me to tell a story? I like stories, perhaps. I watch films, I read books, I watch television, whatever. I come across them, but do I have stories in me? And the thing is, everybody does have stories in them. No, I'm not going to go down the road of saying everybody has a novel in them, but everybody does have stories in them. If you think back, I mean, uh, all of us when we're children, we tell stories. We tell stories to each other, to our parents, but also to ourselves. I mean, you sit around and you have kids telling, so what are you doing? And it's like, oh, and they'll start telling the story. And those of you who have children or remember being children, you tell stories. But along the way, as we grow up, we tend to somehow lose this. We tend to forget that is, it's intrinsic. Storytelling is it makes us. It's one of the things. I'm not saying it's the only thing. It's one of the things that makes us who we are. But we set it aside because we don't tell stories anymore. We stop drawing these pictures because you think about it. As a child, you draw a picture. I mean, my drawing is terrible. Okay, I can tell stories, but my drawing is. But still, I would draw pictures and I go, "Oh, this is that." Tell some stories, etc. Even in my own head, I'm just scribbling away, drawing little things. So you all have that in you. We all have that in you, in us. And what I want to do, and what I try to do through my workshops, is, of course, there are different kinds of workshops. But the workshops that we're planning here, what we're going to do is to discover those stories, the roots of the stories within you. So we will start by looking at, where do we find characters, for instance? How do we develop the characters? And it sounds very kind of dramatic and threatening, but let me give you an example, for instance. We've often we pass people whom we don't know. They're just passing, and somebody think, "Oh, I wonder what he does." And it's actually what we do often in workshops is we take ideas like that, people we've seen, and we build on them and say, okay, you imagine them. What were they like? And say, well, what do you think that person's like? And, I wonder, maybe they're coming back from visiting someone. Or what? So who are they visiting? So think about, oh yeah, maybe they're visiting. So why would they visit that person? And as we say, why would they visit that person? Why were they visiting that person? And maybe visiting the person because they needed to get something, because they're a friend, because that person is sick, or maybe they're angry with that person. I mean, that might also be a reason. Or maybe the visit made them angry. And there's all these things. So there's always there's something happening there. So you've got a tension there, attention in the sense of something that's prompting something. So, okay, so why did they go there? So you now have a person with another person, and they have a relationship of some form. And this relationship then says, okay, so you've gone from having no characters to two characters and you don't just have two characters, they have a relationship, they have an interaction. And then you can follow one of the characters down. You can follow one of the characters or both of the characters down. Are they going to meet again? Okay, that's a question. If they're not going to meet again, why not? If they are going to meet again, why? So you set up these questions for yourself, and that's what we'll do in the workshop. I mean, I probably won't use that particular exercise, but I will use ideas like that, or we will use ideas, because my aim is to facilitate you. I'm not going to tell you, write this story. The aim isn't to say, okay, look at that landscape, which, as it happens, is from Scotland. I'm not going to say, look at that landscape. Now, this is the story tell the story of that. We might use them as prompts, but I'm not telling you what the story is. You have the stories in you. And what we will do is we'll find ways of allowing you to look into yourself, and I don't mean necessarily have to look into yourself and become necessarily self-reflective, though that's one way of doing it, but also to look outwards, to look out at other things, to look around and say, okay, what's the story there? Why is this? I mean, you take this, what's happening here? Why is this person here? How did he come here? I mean, you've got this person sitting on your screen, the pictures of Scotland behind him. He's Indian, Sri Lankan, and he's talking about doing a workshop in Nepal. So where is he? And okay, you can spend your time figuring out who he is, but you can also make up who he is. Okay, and say, okay, well, so who is he? Why is he here? Maybe he's, you can think about, maybe he sells things. I don't know what he sells, but he sells stories in this case. Maybe he sells things, or maybe he makes things. Or maybe he doesn't make things. Maybe, or what is that behind him? Why is that? Is that a rabbit? What's that? What is that? And just by asking these questions, they start prompting things. And what we will do is we'll use those prompts. Then gradually, as the characters build, we start discovering tensions in them, and tensions both in a tense way, but also where people want things. Why do we want? What does that person want? And what the person could be on a big scale, or it could be on a very, very small scale. What the person wants might be something immediate. I want a drink of water. Okay, there's a drink of water there. How does a drink of water get there? And you can start stories prompt quite easily. And this is what we do as children. You say, what are you doing? You say, oh, I'm doing this. Why are you doing that? Well, I'm doing this because da da da. And this all builds up. So we start from there. We start often with people. You can start with places too. We won't go down that road. That's a different prompt, a different way of prompting things. But if stories eventually come down to characters, to people, who could be people or animals, it could be gods, they could be, of course, they could be rocks too, rocks which talk, whatever you want. But they come down to characters, so we'll have those characters there. Then you have incidents where things happen to these characters. So we think about incidents. What happens to this character? He pours a glass of water. He spills the glass of water. Okay, you spilled the glass of water. What happens next? So you start building up a little scene. So something's happening there, and maybe somebody else comes in. Maybe this other person whom you met earlier, that person comes in. And if that person comes in, how do they respond to the fact that he spilled water, and so on and so forth? And you can build it up. And as you're building them, you hear other people. And the wonderful thing about working in a group is you'll be hearing other people coming up with stories. And what happens is people start saying, oh, wait a minute, that's really interesting. Because sometimes it's almost easier to see other people's stories or the stories that they're coming up and say, somebody says, well, I've come up with this person. You go, yeah, but that person could be this. And you start bouncing off each other, and it helps both writers, because by this point, or inventors, maybe, if you don't want to consider yourself a writer yet, the writing is going to happen a little further down the line. You're still inventing, coming up with stories. So you start inventing these stories, and you invent for each other. You help each other. You don't have to take everything that anybody else invents. You think, well, that's interesting. But maybe that gives you another idea. And you've got all this imagination is there. It's just that we've all kind of suppressed it or held it back. And so we'll do that. And then once we do that, we start building the characters, we start building their worlds, the world that they live in, which could be the real world. But even within the real world, what elements of the real world are interesting in terms of the story that's being told? Because where they are, why does he have, coming back to this character sitting in front of you, why does he have a picture of Scotland on the wall behind him? He's not in Scotland. I'm actually, as it happens, in a completely different country. I'm in Amsterdam. Okay, I'm in the Netherlands, I'm in Amsterdam, which is in the Netherlands. So why do I have a picture of Scotland on the wall, and why am I talking to people in Nepal? And what is this? And so you've got all this. So you can start asking questions, which will then create even more interesting background to it. So you start adding these into the mix, and you see which bits are particularly interesting, which ones have more life to them, and then you start adding those together, and then you can bring in other characters. And in workshops, what often happens is we borrow, as I said, we borrow characters, but we might also borrow other ideas from other people. Say, that's an interesting idea. If that person has that function, or does that job, or does that has that profession, or has that attitude, what if I borrowed a bit of that into mine? And so that you bring that in, because characters in the end come from the real world around us. Even if we're completely invented, even if I'm writing a story about a rock. Okay, and the rock is going to have personality. It has personality. And that personality comes from the idea of it is somehow in a sense human. And so we have all these ideas. So that all builds up, and then we gradually build up a person, or a person or personality. And the next stage then is often or another stage, if I follow this particular route, there are different routes. The next stage you might decide to say, okay, I want a plot. I want to, how do I create a plot for this? Because, something happens then, but is that, how does that take it forward? But the question is, so we've got an event. Let's say you decide something major happens to them. This major thing happens, but how did they arrive there? So that's the rising action. So it arrives to this point where this critical moment happens. Okay, and but then what happens after that? Because if you just set it up to there, that's the point. He fell off his chair. Okay. Why did he fall off his chair? What happened after? So he was doing something silly. He's waving his hands, and he somehow slipped and he fell off his chair. That's funny up to a point. Okay, well, you may not consider it funny, but it could be funny. Okay, assuming nothing has happened to this person, me. Okay, and I try not to fall off my chair. But what happens after that? What's the effect of this? And where does it go from there? So we then have the falling action. Then you arrive at some point, which maybe he realizes he needs to fix his chair. At which point I check my chair. So we already have a little bit of a story out there. So it's the rising action. He's arrived. We've got the rising action. He arrives, sets himself up. But I've got an incident. I've got a scene of something happening here, of a story, of a little arc, and what happens? What does he learn from that? Check your chairs before you sit on them. Okay, and it's not really a moral, but it sounds almost like a moral. But okay, so this is kind of a jokey moral story. I've got a little jokey moral story. Then you have a series of incidents, but then so people have lives. Your character then starts having a series of incidents, and which incidents then add up? Okay, which do you want the falling off the chair incident? Does he learn immediately after falling off the chair? Does something else happen in between? Does he need several other incidents, etc.? So we start putting some incidents together, and then we try to create an arc, as we call it, the story arc. So we then have this arc of the story, which sort of rises to the point of the climax, the crisis. People use different words, and then it falls away, and it arrives at a different point. And at the end of it, you go, all right, that's interesting. We've arrived somewhere. And that makes it a story, because that's what we see that's what we used to. We watch it in films again, because films are very common, but read it in books too. It always goes up. It goes up to a point, and then it goes down again. And that's one of the key things. So we then look at the plots. The plots often need work. So what we'll do, so the first day we'll work often on people and places. We'll work on description too. How do you describe a place without giving too much, without going on forever? Because of course you could describe something forever and ever. I mean, even again, looking at this, you could describe me in terms of the way I look, the clothes I'm wearing, and then you decide, okay, let's talk about what he's got on his bookshelf behind him. I don't know how much you can see, but you could start talking about, but just listening, the books could go on forever. So you might pick out a few books. So there's some books like, there's quite a few orangish books in the top. I'm just looking at, actually orange appears at several points. There's orange appears at various points. There's a lot of white too, etc. And some of them kind of jump out. I have no idea why those ones jump out. I haven't thought about this. Okay, and occasionally they're perhaps different languages. So you pick out which details are. So you add all of these things come together, and then you go, okay, I've got this big kind of pot of things, and it could end up a Chhetri, of course. Okay, it can end up this huge pot of things. The question is, how do you, which ones do you need now? Because it's relatively, in that sense, it's relatively easy to come up with with some prompts. So we'll work on that. How do you prompt these ideas coming along? How do you choose them? How do you develop this into an arc which arrives at a place? And the aim will be to help you to start stories from scratch, if you want. And for people who don't want to start from scratch, we will have people, I'm sure, who will be coming along, or quite possibly will come along and say, I have a story. But what we're doing when we're talking about places and people, etc., it's the same thing that we need, whether you're inventing something or you have something that is already ready, you need to look at those. So we look at those characters and those ideas, and you can you look at those characters, those ideas, and say, okay, what is happening here? Why does it work? Or why do I kind of feel it doesn't quite work? Oh, maybe I needed a little bit more of this, or a little bit more of that. So you bring in those ideas. So we'll work on all that. And by the end of the 2 days, okay, and sorry, at the end of the first day, then you have time to go away and think and talk to the others about it outside the writing practice, because we'll be writing in the sessions, very much so. Writing in the sessions, sharing, talking to each other. So you'll do that in the evening. The next day, you will build on that. And by the end of it, you'll have a story. It's as simple as that. I mean, that's the. Will it be the perfect story? Will it be the story you want in exactly the condition you want? Perhaps, perhaps not. But we'll have to see. But you'll have enough there to work on to tell a fuller story. Will you take the story out and complete it and publish it? Will you just keep it for some time? Will you use it as next set? Different people will do different things with it. But you'll also have developed a community. You're no longer alone. You're no longer just this person sitting there writing in a little corner in their room, or they've got a big room, okay, or sitting in a cafe, etc. You're writing. You now got people to talk to, share your writing with, and again, this is something that I and Navin and other writers have experienced. It's wonderful, because you're no longer alone, and you've got other people who are interested in what you're doing, who have similar experiences, and who want to talk about it and can talk about it. Because reading and writing are very different things. They're related, obviously, but we read stories, but to take them forward, to create our own, we need to go somewhere else. But you do have it. I mean, you could almost argue that the creating of a story is almost more basic than the reading of a story. Though listening to stories is why perhaps how come around to actually starting to create stories. So that's what we'll do. And then at the end of the day, you have a story, you have characters, you have you will have discovered that you can tell stories. Is this a story you want to tell? Well, that will be up to you to decide. Is part of this what you want to use? That's also possible. Is this a story you want to complete? Is this going to be the impetus for another story? And I know from past experience with students is some students will go away and they will then create entirely new stories from that starting point, or they will go away and say, okay, that story. I put it aside, but it's like learning to paint. If you learn the basics of how to use a brush and you paint a little bit of a picture, you may not be entirely set, but you know the techniques of doing that. So that then allows you to take it forward yourself in your own time, in your own space, and to start creating other stories, the stories that you want to tell, and to start beginning to see stories, because that's also you start seeing stories around you. You start using your imagination again. This is going back to something that's very, very fundamental to all of us: storytelling. As children, we tell stories. So what I'm going to do in some ways is to take you back to that, but also to take you forward, because children don't necessarily. I'm not saying there are some very brilliant children out there who wouldn't dare to criticize them, but children don't necessarily see that that there is a fullness to this. There's an arc to it. It's got to go on. It got to arrive somewhere. And the children will often serialize stories too, of course. But of course, if you want to serialize stories, it's up to you. So that's what I hope to do with you. I intend to do with you. And I am very, very much looking forward to it. I'm sure it's going to be a wonderful experience. It's been a long time since I've been in the area of the hills. I mean, I went to school, as it happens, in just across, well, little across the border in Kurseong in Darjeeling, but it's a very long time ago. So I was listening in earlier and trying to remember my Nepali, but now I'm afraid it's long gone. But maybe some of it will come back. So that's my plan for you, and I know that some of you will have some questions, and very much looking forward to hearing those questions and to responding to them. So I think at this point I will probably hand it back. And yes, I see we have some question here. Okay, thank you for sharing. Okay, thank you for sharing all the good stuff. Well, where do you get the energy to write every day, or what motivates you? What kind of exercises do you do to generate that creative feeling every day? Any recommendations? So that's a lot of questions. Okay. Where do you get the energy to? Writing is, well, it's like anything that you enjoy. Well, it is something that I enjoy. And so it is something that, you have to find time for. It's as simple as that. You need to find time for it. If you enjoy running, it doesn't happen by itself. So you need to find time to run. But at the same time, as with running, as with anything else, one of the things to realize, and this is what motivates, because it can be disruptive. You write something and think, no, okay, nothing's going to happen with this. But what motivates you realize that everything's learning. It's like running. It's like anything else. Practice helps you to develop and helps you to go forward. What kind of exercises do you do to generate that creative feeling every day? I think one of the key ones is actually just having a rhythm, developing a rhythm. And sometimes there are periods when you realize that this is not going to happen, but being aware and preparing for that, saying, look, in the next 2 or 3 days, because of X, Y, or Z, where I've got a lot of work, other work, I'm going to a wedding or whatever. Not that I'm going to weddings these days in COVID times. So you allow for that, but plan it. It's something like anything else that you do. You need to plan it. You need to find it. Dinner doesn't happen just because it happens. Let's say dinner happens because you plan to have dinner. And you enjoy dinner because you plan to have it, and you sit down to have it. If you enjoy eating and cooking, etc., which, as it happens, I do, and so that's what those would be my recommendations. Plan it, find the time for it, and bear in mind it's practice. It's always practice. I mean, the perfect line will come sometimes, the perfect story will come sometimes, but other times you're practicing, and practice makes perfect. It's like anything else. You want to be a great footballer, you're going to have to go out there and practice. Most of the time, you're just kicking a ball, just within quotes, kicking a ball around. No, you're doing a little more than just kicking a ball around. You're practicing with that. More questions? My pleasure.
I have a question. That was very informative, Amal. Thank you so much. Suddenly, it feels like I too can become a fiction writer,
I'm
and
sure you are when
something
you
that
talk to
that I'm
me.
always very scared of. Because I've always felt that I cannot. I'm not into this fictional world, and I cannot create stories out of the characters or the elements that I see around me. But suddenly, it feels like um, I too can write a story. So thank you very much for for that. And my question to you would be, Shobha Day somewhere mentioned that I think it was in the literature festival held here back in 2-3 years ago. She mentioned that she writes 2,000 words every day. So how important is it? Like Haruki Murakami has also said that what he talks when in one of his book, what I talk about when I talk about running. So it's
Mhm.
basically about the book is basically about writing as a practice.
Mhm.
So do you think it is important for the aspiring writers to write something, at least make an effort to write something as a practice every day or not?
Well, certainly it's important to make a practice. It's not going to happen without practicing, and I think I mean, the Murakami analogy is is a good one, very good one, because and it happens to time when I was talking about the idea. I mentioned that idea of running, because if you don't practice, it isn't going to happen. The idea that you can go out there and, well, to take the analogy of running for a minute longer, the idea that you're going to go out there and do the perfect run isn't going to happen. You've got to practice, and you're going to stumble. You're going to have to it's going to ache a bit here and there. And the same is true with writing. You really need to develop a rhythm for yourself. And what different people do at different times. I mean, I have friends I know who writer friends who some of them will wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and they will say every day we write between 5 and 7. That would not work for me. I do not wake up at 5. If I do wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, I want to go back to bed or have a cup of tea or whatever. That's not for me. I mean, I tend to work later in the evening. That's my time. So I then set aside and say, okay, this is the time I'm going to do it. So I think that is really important. You need to create a rhythm for yourself, a pattern for yourself. What the pattern and the rhythm is will vary from person to person. So as just Shobha there has her target of 2,000 words, and I know people who do similar things like that. And I will confess for myself, I do vary my targets. It's like, but it also depends on what I'm doing. Well, in terms of the writing, sometimes I need to get a number of words on the page because I need to take it forward. At other times, it's like I'm going to have to do an editing task, etc. I'm going to revise it, and I tend to find that if I give the time for it, I mean, sometimes I go in there and think it's just not going to happen. Uh, and I'll spend a lot of time trying to get into it. And then eventually it does, because I've got the practice of it. At some point it clicks. But unless I have the practice, it's not going to happen. And it's not going to happen because, well, I don't have the practice, and B, because I spend my time worrying that it's not going to happen. But if I know it happens, then I stop worrying about the fact that it hasn't happened quite yet. So I'm trying to write my 2,000 words and I haven't got 2,000 words. Okay, it didn't happen today. So tomorrow I come in at the same time, same place, or whatever my pattern is, and I go at it again. And at some point, it comes out. It'll come through. Does that? I hope that answers a bit. My pleasure. Okay. Further. Sorry. I see some notes there. Yeah. Okay. No, those are private chats. Any other questions? I can't hear.
Sorry, definitely yes. I think we have some other questions coming up. I also wanted to ask you about how important it is to rewrite, because most of us, we are just too tired, or we are just not interested in writing several drafts. And I
Mhm.
think it's important for writers to prepare, not only to prepare an outline sketch about everything that you said, but it's also important to rewrite. So how much of rewriting is necessary?
That's almost how long as a piece of string in a sense. But to be more to be realistic, but yes, we need to revise. That is, well, there may be the rare occasion where that we'll have the things will happen immediately, but you do need to revise. And again, like the writing itself, you need to develop your own techniques and your own. You need to work on what works for you. Are you going to revise on a daily basis? Some people can do that. Are you going to revise on a weekly basis? Are you going to revise when you reach a certain point? I personally prefer to write for some time and then go back to revision because it gives me some. I like to get distance from the. Somebody talked about leaving writing to drain on the sideboard for a while. So sometimes I'll even work on more than one idea at a time, and then that allows me to come back to the first one. So I write a story or part of a story or part of a concept even, then I go away and work on something else, and then I can come back to it. So revision is really important, but very often you need distance or you need some way of seeing it again. That again is something that a workshop can be really good. It speeds things up in some ways because you're getting that immediate response from other people around you, or you're getting the response from when you tell it, you see and you hear how other people respond to it, and that gives you the impetus to revise, because otherwise revising can feel like a bit of a chore, but it doesn't have to be, because the finished product then comes up. Again, if you take an analogy of, I don't know, sculpture, for instance, if you're sculpting something, or maybe, okay, I can't sculpt, probably plasticine is the level of my artistic ability, but even there, you keep revising it and you keep making it until it looks the way you want. And then at some point you realize, okay, this is the way I want it to be. And that's when the revision is done. And you're ready to move on to the next thing. And sometimes you may want to put it aside and come back to it. And sometimes the projects and ideas that I come back to, sometimes weeks, months, even years later, I'll go, hey, wait, hang on a second, I had that idea. Let me look at that. So, yeah, that's somebody I think asked a question about two different people will have to. Oh yeah, here we go. You observe the same environment, same society, but one person can present the scenario in beautiful words, but another can't. What's the difference between these two people? I think the same could be true of a single person. You can look at the same scenario, and on some occasions you can tell it well, and on other occasions you can't tell it well. What's beautiful to one person is not necessarily beautiful to another. I mean, that's why we've got the books that I like, which you probably hate. Okay, possibly, whoever you are. Okay, and vice versa. Maybe hate is too strong a word, but it's quite possible. Hate, not in the sense of I think it's a terrible thing. There's no way I'm going to read that, or a story there's no way. We all have tastes, so and you need to find your own voice. And different people have different voices. It's really important to realize. And how you tell it. So how beautiful! I mean, I suppose I could use the cliche in a sense. The beauty is in the eyes of the person who's seeing it. So what you see and how whether it is beautiful or not is what you see and how you see it. So there is no. I would argue that there is no difference. But is one going to be more beautiful to other people or more? That's quite possible. Yeah, in fact, that's quite likely. And that's why we say, okay, so-and-so is a beautiful writer. I mean, Navin, for instance, is a great poet. I mean, he's a wonderful poet. And I dare say that I can't write poetry like him. In fact, I know I can't write poetry like him. I would love to write poetry like Navin, whom you will meet shortly. And some of you may already know, but that's the way it is. Okay. Natural born writers with no creative writing training. Everybody is okay in terms of taking it more specifically in the area that I deal with. As I said, everybody is a storyteller. We're all storytellers. How satisfying the stories are and to whom will vary. And you asked the question of difference between natural born writers with no creative writing training. Everybody has the potential to be a writer. How good they'll be, how much effort they're willing to put into it, how long it will take, that varies. People who have training in creative writing, people who work with others, yeah, they've got an advantage. But it's because they have feedback, they're immediately getting feedback on it, so that helps. Is that going to change the quality of their output? Again, it varies from person to person and from writer to writer. We certainly learn from it. I know myself. I mean, I started writing without having had the time. I started writing with the relatively few. But I know over the years, working in workshopping with fellow writers and people wanted to write. I mean, I workshop with people who hadn't necessarily published yet, and some of them, are still working on their work. And I've worked with them, I've read and written with them for many years. So that does take different forms with different people. Um, Not necessarily. Difficult is it? So the question is it must be familiar with difficult words to write? Not necessarily. Not all writers use difficult words. You don't. Again, thinking back on the idea of being a child, children don't necessarily use difficult words. Very simple words can tell a story. So no, you don't. You don't need it. You do have to read. I would argue to tell a good story. You can create a story, but to tell a story that satisfies you and other people, you do need to read. But I mean, we're bOOkaholics, so I think that's a given. It's unlikely that if you don't read at least a reasonable amount. Oh,
Thank you, Amal. It's really wonderful that this session is turning out to be really very interactive with lots of questions coming in from the readers, from the viewers, let's say, because this is something that is something very unlikely to happen during the live sessions. They have got lots of questions and all. You also have some private questions, I guess, from your friends who have also joined you. So if you
yes,
could check
yes.
and answer,
Oh, yeah.
and then
Mhm. Sorry, shall I?
yeah, you can go.
Okay, so yeah, I just saw a couple of questions there. Okay, so couple of private questions came in. What are the plans for these retreats in the coming years? I think I can say fairly safely say yes. We have every intention of doing these again. So we shall see. Yeah, we shall see how it goes. I mean, we have the intend to do it. Another question is: writer's block a real thing? Oh yes, it is definitely a real thing. However, in the sense of we all feel it. But going back to our previous suggestion that you need to you need to make yourself right. It's not going to happen unless you do it. You're not going to run if you don't go running. And So you need to write. Yeah. Well, there's a writer's block, a real thing as a game we play ourselves. Yes. That's a question I'm answering. I beg your pardon. Thank you, guys. There was another question which was on the screen which I missed. More questions. More the questions, more the ideas. What does it take to be a good writer in terms of content and writing? What should be done with the great ideas running in mind? Well, first, one important thing to do is if you have ideas, write them down. I think that's really important. If you don't write the ideas down, you're never going to be able to look at them. And if you think you're not too sure whether whether you can take it forward yet, well, write it down and come back to it. I mean, once you come back to it, it could be later in a few hours or a few days. Come back to it and look at it and say, well, and that's what we'll do. I mean, okay, that's what we'll do in the sense of the workshops. Give you the chance to see what you can do with the very smallest bit of an idea and how you can build that into a full story, into a big story. What does it take to be a good writer in terms of content and writing? Good question, I'm afraid. What does it take to be a good writer in terms of content? You've got to love what you're writing about. You've got to care about it. If you don't care about it, you're not going to be able to write it. And when I say care about it, you could care about it in different ways. It may be a theme that you're very interested in. It may be a character you're very interested in. It may be a place you're very interested in. I mean, working with people, writing stories, it's like, I want to tell the story of this place, and the place becomes the character in many ways. So you've got to be passionate about what you're writing about. That's absolutely essential to good writing. Otherwise, I mean, you can turn out a good other people. I mean, there are people who sometimes can turn out a good sentence, but that isn't necessarily they themselves wouldn't necessarily consider it good writing. My pleasure. Thank you for that. Can I share my favorite books and authors? Oh God, that is so hard. Marti Leimbach, who's lurking in there, is one of my favorite writers, both as a writer and a person. Navin is another one. It's very, very hard. You just peer at my bookshelf behind me. I'll just look around and tell you some. Actually, I think this out here I've got from A to M, so I don't know. It's very hard to tell, especially in advance. Sorry.
Perhaps while you look around and look through the questions once again to see if you have missed out anything, we could probably ask Navin to step in and talk about the creative writing retreat that we are having, and also there are questions like why is Nepali literature not being able to take remarkable place in the world literature. So I think that is something probably Nabin could answer. So we'd like to take a break for some time, and let's have Nabin. Thank you, Amar.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you very much.
We'll come back to you.
Oh, hi,
Nabin,
hi,
uh,
and
so just this writing retreat is also going to be about poetry writing. So there are a few questions that, one of them being why Nepali literature is not being able to take remarkable place in the world literature. So probably you could shed some light on that, and talks a little bit about poetry writing and what it takes, because everything, uh, poems are something that I dread. It's very difficult. I feel that it's very difficult. This is the genre of writing that I dread personally. I've these days I've seen that there are no, like, there's nothing, not a certain pattern that the poets really follow. So what is the new trend? Because sometimes I feel like something that I write in this manner is written in this manner, and it becomes a poem, and I'm not okay with it. So probably you could shed some light on poetry writing, and how, as a writer, has been the journey to you, because you've already been published and you're waiting for your next publication in the year 2023. That's a long, long, long time to, and you need to be really patient with that, because we often feel that once we write something, it needs to be published, or we're good enough to be published. So we take criticisms and, rejections very harshly. That's uh, that's what I feel personally. I'm sure other people can also relate to it. So there are new writers who have been wanting to get published, but still, because the manuscripts and all, they get rejected time and again. So it's really frustrating. So if you could throw a little light on all these things. Thank you so much for joining us.
thank you, Saguna. I guess you can hear me.
Yes, you're clear.
So before saying something, with the permission of my guru over here, Amal Chatterjee, it's a privilege, and with his kind permission, and I have another guru at the backstage, Marti Leimbach. She's a famous author and author of Dying Young as well, which was made into a Hollywood movie. So she's also there. So with permission, and also I'd like to thank Saguna, a wonderful friend of mine, and to all the bOOkaholics audience. I mean, before I forget, I just want to say a few lines. bOOkaholics has been phenomenal, especially during this lockdown. I think so you guys have done a wonderful job. All those faces behind Ganesh Karkiji, who is right now at the backstage, and Silky Moonri and Vivek Adhikari. So, I mean, I want to give a big round of applause to all of you. And I think this is a very historical. Nobody in Nepal has ever done that, because I can see that from outside. So this creative writing retreat that we have planned for June, as I think so Amal has spoken a lot about that, and it's also to give you alone time for yourself to write over there, and also there'll be a big community of like-minded people, and that's where you can share your feelings, share your writings. I think so that matters a lot, and you also have time to write yourself, reflect as well, and like there'll be a workshops, and I can see that like when you at the end of the workshop you'll be refreshed, and each one of you, whoever comes over there, will go home with a story or a poem. So we're looking forward to that. Uh, Regarding poetry, I don't know, it's quite a complicated thing, but I'll share a little bit of my own experience. When I was in Nepal, I don't know, I just started when I was quite small. I used to write a lot, and but I never knew what it meant to the world, like. And when I came to the United Kingdom, I used to you know, submit a lot of poetry to journals here, there. I started getting rejections. One, two, three. I think so. I've got more than 100 rejections to, uh, for a guy from Nepal. And those rejections used to be frustrating at first, but later on, I saw that no, I need to do something more. And then the only key is you read and write and practice. I think so, as Amal said, that you just have to practice. There's no other shortcut to that, and it'll build up slowly. The main uh, eh, purpose of the writing retreat also is also to give a type of the feeling of a residency. That's quite common among us writers and poets all throughout the world. They can buy time, and it's to tend yourself. Like you don't have to. You are breaking a routine, and you are loving yourself. Like you are giving time for yourself. Like suppose if your name is, let's say, Gopal. Okay, Gopal, I'm giving time for myself. Like you're really and this is happening in Seren Valley Resort. I think it's Seren Resort, Seren Valley Resort in Nagarkot. So we'll be over there on the second and third, and on the fourth we'll get back. And okay, and this is happening with in collaboration with the bOOkaholics. Before that, we planned to launch a competition, creative writing competition. It might be a short story or a poem that I think so it'll come through bOOkaholics as well. And there'll be some time for the to submit your creation, and we'll give the award during the residency. So that'll give a bit of a like connection with the residency as well. The second thing is Mr. Mountain has also launched. Will launch Jared Rochford International Poetry Competition. It's quite international, and we'll send the links over there as well. It's judged by Dr. Wen Price, who is a creative writing coordinator at the University of Aberdeen, and we'll also give opportunity, to post it there. And we would want, you know, audience for the bOOkaholics and creative writers, poets, aspiring writers, students from Nepal to take part in that. And the creative writing competition is hosted in memory of Jared Rochford, a wonderful poet who passed away last year. The first prize we're giving away is £150 with a plaque written by, with a plaque of Jared's poetry. And the second and third runners-up will get £50 as well as a plaque as well. Regarding the residency, and we've right now set up like 40 places, a first come first basis. So you can book your spot through Mr. Mountain website as well, or you can contact Saguna Sa or the bOOkaholics team to book a place. Other than that, so as I said, that we've Saguna was asking me what's happening to Nepali literature. Why isn't it lagging behind and all this in terms of international representation and all. I don't have the authority to say that, but what I can see as a poet is that I see that there's a very less representation of poets writing in Nepali. It's not because of them. We have wonderful poets in Nepal writing in Nepali, but I think there's a lack of translation or rightful translation. That's not going in the right place. So we've also started like independent translation by keeping in view of that particular problem. So we are not doing novel at the moment, but we're doing poetry and short stories. So if you're interested, that you can get in touch with uh, bOOkaholics team as well, or the independent translation. Through that you can find it in Mist and Mountain as well. So the major purpose uh, of that translation is to focus more on poetry, so that it goes into the international. It goes into international journals. So so keeping that in view, what we are trying to do right now is, or what we are doing right now is, we are creating we are publishing an anthology of 30 Nepali poets, whether they write in Nepali or English. And if they write in Nepali, we're translating that into English. And if they are writing in English, we're translating that into Nepali. So the project, again, is called A View from My Window. So we have a few poets whose name I'm going to read out, who are the part of this. We've got Abhi Sir, Abhi Subedi Sir, Bhisma Upreti, Saguna Saha, Mukul Dahal, Saraswati Lamisane, Rajav, Mukahang Lembu, Tulsi Divasa, Sirjan Abiral, LB Chhetri, Isor Kadel, Bhupin Kharga. And we have, we'll just, once everything is complete, we'll let, just wanted to give a hint of what we are doing in terms of promoting poetry translation. And on the poetry forefront, like what type of workshop is the poetry what we are going to give during the workshop? Like, I just want to give a small bit of a, let's say the workshop can be anything. Like, it can be like writing from a memory, it can be writing using your senses in writing poetry. Like, for example, uh, we might be told to, okay, think of a place where you have been, like, and you write 2 sentences. Then you write, okay, think of someone you know, your relatives or near dear ones or lover. And then it might be, okay, what can you remember the time of the day, or is it evening, is it morning? So then you'll be writing. Then it can be like, can you feel something, like sense of touch, is it can you feel the wind, or can you feel the salt on the lips, on your tongue, or something like that? So it will be basically the incorporation of senses, memories, and at the end of the day, I mean, you'll have written a poem. So there's various type of things that we'll be doing during that workshop. Have I missed something? Okay. Yeah. I'll just see if there's any question over there. Yeah. What is the British view of American creative writing versus their British? I don't know much about this. I don't think so. Again, I can speak about that. I think creative writing is something. It's quite healing. Like, just wanted to. Uh, it's quite healing. I've seen a friend who was saved, who tried to commit suicide, and poetry saved her. So, and these days poetry is being used in hospital premises as well, for mental health. So it gives, when you express something through poetry, I think it'll give you a sense of well-being as well. Yeah. Okay, is there any more question? Sorry about that, I couldn't answer that. British view of
Perhaps Amal can answer that later.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
there's one question: was it a struggle for you to be accepted as a English writer with your background from outside of Britain?
yeah. That was. I think it was quite a struggle. Many years, I think, before my first poem got published in a good journal. So yeah, it's struggle in terms of the language, is struggle in terms of, now it's quite we don't have, if you have a good quality, then they won't care, like it just goes for the quality. But when you come, when I first came from Nepal, it was quite a struggle for me. But the struggle was that I needed more information. I had to get used to rejections. I had to get used to, and the other thing is what, you might face is, it's not a technical course. Like, for example, it's not like a doctor or engineer, you get a job, you get paid. Like, if you are into poetry for money, then I don't think so. That would be the wrong wrong place. Like, you don't know where the future is, but you just love poetry. That, so the love and the flair has to be there.
Naveen, there's one more question for you. When you're writing something in a language other than your own, would you think it in your mother tongue first and translate it in English or any other language? Could you share your lifelong experience on it?
When I write, I think I mostly write on memories. Memories evoke, and they touch me. Like, and I also write about nature. And when thinking about poetry in your head, yes, of course, the first thing, I mean, you feel more comfortable with the mother tongue. But I have to admit that I'm not good at writing in Nepali, though I've tried a few poems. And yeah, first you think in your mother tongue, and then you try to translate. But one good thing about writing about, there's a lot of things to write about Nepal, which I'll just read one poem at last, like, just to give you a sense of how you can bring your background into your poetry, which is quite marginal, like, which is quite, not many people have written, like, just because of the, maybe there's a huge barrier of language that prohibits Nepalese literature from coming into the world literature. And think about, like, 100 years of solitude, it's wonderfully translated, but you won't know that it's, I mean, it is a translated, because it's it's such fine, like. So I think so, a little bit more investments should do, all the creatives from Nepal, and like us, like, we should invest more on those translation portals, rather than, like, just uh, doing individual translation. Like, we just see where we stand, because there's no doubt about it. There's phenomenal. Uh, I mean, in terms of quality, we've got, but we just have to have that rightfully translated. Yes.
Naveen, I have a question for you. There's a sense of longing. I've been reading your drafts, I've read your poetry book, and there's a sense of longing, longing for home. You're quite nostalgic when you write poetry. And can you shed a little light on this? So much of longing in your writings. Do you
Yeah.
miss home often? Like, why did you? I find that you miss home a lot.
Yeah,
Is
yeah. It's just because physically I haven't been able to over there, but the mind is always over there. Like, it's yeah, it's a very good subject maybe to write about. Even in Jared Rochford poetry competition, the theme is family. So what I think that means is, like, home, family, childhood. That's important to everybody, and it means a lot to everybody. And the fact that, where is home? What is home? That's 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 quite an interesting and intricate question as well. You don't know where is home. Is it a place where you are living, or is it where you're born? Like, so maybe my poem swing between those two realities. Like, and uh, somewhere, and memory helps. Like, to get those feelings out. In forms of in form of the most distilled version of language, the poetry, distilled form of language. Mhm.
Um, One more question to you, Nabin, from myself. Um is it possible for the readers, for the aspiring writers over here, after taking the workshop that Mist and Mountain is organizing along with Bookaholics, is it possible for aspiring writers to join Mist and Mountain's creative writing workshop in Aberdeen? Is it possible? If so, what is the process of getting involved in?
I think I thought I would talk about that, and that's what I nearly missed. Thanks for reminding, Saguna. Yeah, Mistin Mountain Residency right now is open for international applications from the 23rd from the 20th of May. It's in the website, and we have a deadline of 30th May, and the residency is starting on the 23rd of July till for 1 week and 3 days as well. But right now it's just self-funded, so we are working with like fund people. If you get funded, definitely, you're most welcome to apply. And it's set in Aboyne. It's near Balmoral Castle, where the Queen goes every year. She spends 3 months. And we have a partnership with the castle premise as well. That means any creatives who come over here, uh, you know you can get a tour of the state as well, like so, uh, with a kind permission of the ranger. So that's a good thing, like it's just near the uh, royal decide, Balmoral Castle. And once it's open, it'll be on the website as well, the funded. But if you can come anytime. You can apply for the self-funded option, and more information will be updated on the website. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Naveen. There are two questions. Probably, maybe Amal can step in to answer those two questions that have been left out. And we also have Marti Leimbach with us, who uh, I would like to be introduced by Amal, because uh, he would be the right person to be talking about Marti Leimbach, and she has responded back that okay, she's willing to share some of her words with us. So at the end of the session, maybe after you're done with the questions, you could probably introduce Marti Leimbach with us. Thank you, Amal. There are two questions. I think, what is the British view of American creative writing uh, versus I don't know, English British? Is one superior than the other? Amal, I think your microphone is still muted.
I'm tempted to bring Marty in here as our American colleague, but she's also British. She's actually, in some ways, she lives in Britain very much, and I don't actually live in Britain, so it's all slightly. And actually, that's quite a good point, because it's not that easy. It's complicated. I don't think there's I don't think there's any. There may be some competition sometimes, but on a fairly general scale. I mean, it's not a they're not two worlds. I mean, where the writers in English, it happens, and not necessarily even in English, of course, because people do write in many other languages. I mean, with Gaelic and Welsh, and the Spanish and many other languages in the United States. Of course, people write in many languages. So I don't think there's. And I certainly would not say one is superior to the other. Absolutely not. No, I mean, I wouldn't even go there as a thing. I don't think anybody's creative writing is superior to anybody else's. I mean, there is good writing, there is enjoyable writing, there's entertaining writing, there's amusing writing, and that's universal. I wouldn't want to go down that road at all. I wouldn't worry about it. I wouldn't think about it either. And was there another?
There's another question. I often feel authors are pretty much sure about the climax in fiction writing. I wish to listen to your insight on this. I mean, do they already have a message? That's why they know the ending and making the story as large as much possible, or how does it work while ending the story? So basically, it's about the climax.
Yes. Okay. Well, I think different story, different writers, different story. I mean, different writers, of course, have different ways of writing. Some people will create frameworks and will kind of hang the story and build around it. Other people will do it more sort of organically. Other ones will say, okay, here's my climax. This is where I want to arrive. They will arrive there. But I would also argue that all stories need. I mean, I'd suggest that for many writers, this will change. Different stories require different things. I mean, that's going to be very interesting. Marty will be able to tell us about her process too, because Marty's got lots of experience too, and she can talk about that. And we've all worked with different writers, and I think different writers do things differently. So, do they already have a message? Some do. You do need a climax at some point. Well, you could try writing a story without a climax. It's going to be very difficult to keep it to hold your reader's interest, and it's going to probably be very difficult for yourself to make the story keep the story moving. It may become a description. It may become even an anecdote, though anecdotes tend to end on the climax. So you need to. It could be that you will discover the climax as you go along, because very often stories develop, and that's one of the things about story writing. When you get down to it, stories often take on a life of their own, and at some point you need to let them take on a life of their own. That doesn't mean you need to lose control of them. You may then go back to the original version, having tried those things out. So you don't necessarily know where it ends. You often have a sense of where it ends, and sometimes you do know where it ends, and you're taking it there. Occasionally, maybe more than occasionally, again, I think it'd be nice to hear from Marty on this. It doesn't arrive where you intended, but that's absolutely fine. If it arrives where it needs to go, that's what you need to do. And so, yeah, the climax, you need a climax. Do you need it before? Not necessarily. Do you need one at some point? Absolutely. Will it come? Almost certainly. And then you need to go on from there. Okay.
Thank you, Amal. I have a question for you. I'm sure writing a novel can be a very tedious task. So, how do you sustain the energy and inspiration to finish one?
Well, you could be interested. You could be very interested in what you're doing. That helps. Okay. Well, you have to have it. You also need to have discipline. That is very, very important. And you could need to spend time working on it. It's not going to, as we've talked about earlier, the idea that these things require practice. They require practice, obviously, but they require effort. So you're going to do that. You're going to have to put that in. You need to put that effort in. How do you keep it up? Well, that's where having a community of writers or people who are interested or who are interested in your writing, either way, but sometimes I find having a community of writers is one of the greatest things. I mean, being able to just not necessarily tell the other writers the story, but even to just talk about it, because then it can help to know that you're not alone, and that where you're going is a journey that's worth continuing on. And people often have, well, they talk about first readers, second readers, mentors, etc. Writers often have this, or first listeners, sometimes, because you need to talk the story out. And I think those are very useful. But again, everybody needs to find their own way. But if you're feeling alone and lost with your writing, talk to somebody about it. Talk to other writers about it. People who really who are willing to put the effort in, and they will. That will help you, I think. And go away and read. That often helps. I mean, if I've had a very busy period of teaching, or for instance, or other work, editing or other work, sometimes I need to spend a few days just reading, because that just gets me back in the mode. So if you are struggling with your writing, maybe go away, read for a bit, and then come back. You don't have to read the same thing. Absolutely not. Read what you enjoy. Read what you want to read at that time. I suppose, like many readers, I often have more than one book on the go. So I pick the book that appeals to me at that point in time. So kind of.
I do agree that it's very important for us to read. If you want to become a good writer, you have to be a good reader. That's how I feel. So, what is more interesting to you, writing short stories or writing writing a novel?
It varies. It depends on what I'm at. I mean, I've written nonfiction, I've written history, I've written drama, I've written short stories, I've written novel. It depends. I don't. I think it depends on, not quite on the time of day. It's not that bad, but it depends on where you are where I am at a particular point in time. And I'll often have more than one idea or project on the go. But I mean, they can take years, and that's the thing. I mean, it's when I've had had a family growing up, etc. So we spend time there. So that takes, well, I'm sure again, the other parties who are here will talk about that.
Thank you. There's one question over here. I don't know if it is the right question or not. Can you tell about the admission process in Oxford? Now we have two scholars from Oxford talking to us, so I'm sure it's a long way. And actually, this is a privilege, to have you with us over here, because it's like Oxford coming to Nepal and then coming with creative writing retreat again in July. So actually, it's a wonderful opportunity for those who cannot apply, or for those who cannot afford to go abroad. But however, share us a little about the process.
Well, I mean, the information on how to apply to the Oxford Masters program, and of course, there are different programs at Oxford. I also teach online courses, and I think a couple of my former students from my online courses have very kindly showed up. They're lurking around there. Hi, Kinjal, and hi, Marti. Melina, I beg your pardon. Marti is not one of my students; she's one of my colleagues. So it's very nice of them to show. So the admission process, well, it's all on the website. If you just go to the website, you'll find out there. You've got to fill in forms. You've got to write a portfolio. You've got to prepare some material that you're going to submit. You've got to write a covering letter. So take a look at those. I mean, actually, Navin has been through this, so he can also tell you about it from the, if you wanted the coalface from that end of it, so you can tell us how that works. So that's the process of it. It's a very transparent process. There are a number of deadlines that you can, dates that you can apply at, and we've got different. So we're currently in the process of it. I think there's another deadline coming up. I'm looking around, but I don't know where my notes are. So I didn't expect that question. I'm sorry. But please do apply. I mean, this is something very important. We do want writers from a very, very keen on having writers from around the world and from a wide range of backgrounds and interests, and so please do apply. I know it's not very much of an answer. I'm sorry, it came out of the blue. I promise you, it is on the website, and I'm sure that when I'm around, but in our wonderful administrator at Oxford, Rebecca Rue, will answer any of the questions.
Thank you, Amal. It has been wonderful talking to you and listening to you on various aspects of writing. And since there aren't any more questions at the moment, would you like to introduce Marti?
I would be delighted to introduce Marti. Just give me. Okay.
Have questions for Marti as well.
Okay, it gives me and Navin a very, very great pleasure to introduce a surprise guest. She did say she was coming, but we're really, really grateful that you're willing to come on, Marti. Lovely to see you. We haven't met in person for over a year now, which is unusual. We usually see each other several times a year at Oxford, but we haven't seen. So Marti is a wonderful writer. Marti's written 7 novels, including, well, as Navin mentioned, Daniel Isn't Talking, and the New York Times bestseller, Dying Young, which went on to become a film. Her novel Dragonfly Girl has just come out, and it's YA. It's just come out, and it's getting wonderful reviews, as it absolutely rightly deserves. So, ladies and gentlemen, Marti Leimbach.
Thank you. Nice to see you, Amal.
Lovely to see you. It's really unexpected. Great.
And Navin. I feel like I'm sitting around my friends. It's great. Hello, Saguna. Thank you for inviting me.
Welcome, Marti, and that's so nice of you to agree to come and just step into our talk, and you've been there backstage all the while, so it's really a pleasure having you with us. Thank you so much for joining, and we'd really love to hear from you about your novel, about the movies that have been adapted on your novel. I read that Julia Roberts was one of the stars in the novel that you wrote. So can you please share the floor here?
Well, I have to say that was a kind of unusual circumstance. You don't normally, when you write a novel, you should never be thinking that this is all about getting it to Hollywood. However, there will be the occasional novel that, for whatever reasons, and we can talk about what those reasons are if you like, strikes and begins to be something that a different audience would like to address. And when that novel is purchased, I want just to make very clear that almost the first thing they do is kind of write the author straight out of the picture. They will take your work as a novelist and they will completely redo it into a different format, because whenever we change media, whenever we change from one genre, say a long form novel, to another genre, be that poetry or drama or, you know, film, everything about it changes. So I was very lucky in that the movie came out, because it simply meant that the novel itself got a higher profile and became something that's, you know, sort of stuck around for a much longer time than it might otherwise have done. However, since then, I've written other novels, some of which have been optioned, most of which have not been, which might even be better books, but that's not really the issue. The issue is sort of, you kind of get lucky or you kind of don't. My latest book, Dragonfly Girl, I, of course, would hope that someone would take an interest in that and its sequel, which is called Academy 1. But if they don't, that's okay. That's not why I'm here. I'm here as a novelist from this earth.
Thank you so much, Marti. There's one question, probably you could answer that question. What would be your suggestion on making the stories purposeful? How can a beautiful piece of fiction move beyond the aesthetics and touch more pressing issue? Is there a, the question seems to be very long. There are multiple questions over here. Is there a golden mean between aesthetically appealing writing and also at the same time addressing the pressing issue beyond personal musings head on? If yes, what are your suggestions to aspire for that? So probably all of you can share about this, beginning with Marti.
Okay, well, this opens up a whole discipline about aesthetics, so I won't get too far into it. I really love to hear what Navin has to say about this, as he's a poet. I think what the question is about is, to what extent do we attend to those things that interest us personally, or perhaps the language that interests us or that makes us excited about writing? How do we balance this with what we'd call a big book, a big story? And I think that some of our best, most memorable novels, and that's really the only form to which I'm now speaking, would be those that take a kind of large external big look at something, and then within that large picture, that external problem, say, in the case of Academy 1, which I'm now writing, a girl is stuck in a terrible situation in a kind of school, and she must escape it, but she could just escape it, except there's another complication. So the external pressure is there, that there's this academy, which is kind of this evil academy, but there's another story, and that story is much more personal, and that story is about her relationships with people within the academy. So lots of times in novels, we see more than one story taking place. We see that big story that you kind of, I'm speaking to the person who asked the question, is alluding to when you say, you know, pressing issues, or, you know, the bigger picture or whatever. We've got that big story, but we also have another story or other stories, which are much more personal, smaller, and on other threads, which are nonetheless critical to making that book be memorable. Now, how is it memorable? Why does this matter? Funny enough, the big picture doesn't really matter unless those smaller issues matter a lot. And that's because otherwise we just look at news stories. News stories are the big picture. Why would we need drama? We need drama because we want to see the change. We want to see the change from that character at the moment that they started within the story. Where did they start from? And we will compare that to where they end. They must have a personal stake in that story that causes a change inside them. We're thirsty for that as readers. We are reluctant as human beings to want to change. Sometimes we do want to change. We don't even know how. But when we see change, we see something dynamic. And when we see that dynamic movement, we're drawn in. And we're also drawn in by the externals. Of course we are. That often is the decision basis on which we decide, well, am I going to watch this film? Am I going to read this novel? What's it about? Okay. But honestly, it doesn't really matter what it's about if you don't have those characters we care about changing through progressive complications within the structure of the book to something different from whoever they were when they started out. I see a question.
For you. Yes, there's a comment for you.
Okay, it says, hi, Marty, thanks for sharing good stuff. Do you think you were born as a novelist, or is it something that you have achieved with hard work and dedication? Excellent question. I was not born a novelist. I was just, I was maybe a little bit more communicative, maybe a little bit more driven to do long-term internal projects, because one of the characteristics of a novelist is they must be alone for a great deal of time. Now, when I say alone, sometimes it's nice to be alone, but within a larger context, like a residency. So you're sort of alone, but not alone, because you need to have time to write the thing, but you also need that structure around you to reinforce your identity as a novelist. So I wasn't born a novelist, but I had something early on that really did help me. Well, I had lots of things. One I had was an example. So my mother was a journalist. So, okay, I'm not a journalist. But what I did see was her dedication to writing and her affinity with words, with language, with books. And so these things became what I valued too. It's very hard to be a novelist when you're born into a family that just doesn't, or a culture or a village or a whatever, it doesn't value this stuff. You've got to value it. And so if you have people around you who value it, then you have an advantage. So in that sense, I was born to become a writer, or at least a communicator in some respect. I hope that answers your question. There is a lot of hard work, by the way. It's pretty boring. You need to sit down and you need to just get stuck into the work, even when it's very frustrating.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing your words with us, Marti. It was wonderful having you with us, and just I'm really humbled by, I really feel happy that you're so humility personified, that you stepped in with us at the last moment. So as a part, I think the session is almost 1.5 hours long. So as a parting note, I would love if you all share anything to the viewers.
Okay, maybe I'll just bounce off Marty's last.
Oh, you wait. Yes, I was hoping so.
Marty, I mean, nobody's born a writer, but having a community of some form, and it's not necessarily a massive community. It could be just having a sibling, a friend, somebody across the road who reads and has books. I mean, this idea of books behind us. Now it's become a Zoom thing. Everybody, or these thing. But having somebody who reads. I grew up in Calcutta, Kolkata, as we call it. No, it is not far from Nepal in that sense. And I went to schools across the world. But we had books. And I grew up in a culture. My parents read books. We had books in the house. I was allowed to read anything in the house. I read stuff that was entirely inappropriate in the sense of I didn't even know what it was about. I was reading, and I was reading Gorky at the age of 10. I had no idea what I was reading. Do not waste your time reading Gorky. Well, by all means, read Gorky at the age of 10. I don't know what it'll do to you. It doesn't seem to have done me any harm, but it was there. And I said, "Can I read that?" It's like, okay, read it. So I read. So she read these things and was surrounded by people who liked reading and writing. And of course, those of you in Nepal, you may know that Calcutta is known for, or Kolkata is known for being slightly obsessed by reading. They have a book fair which is enormous, and everybody. That's what I say. All my friends read. Many of my friends didn't read, and which was an advantage in the school sometimes, because we only allowed 1 or 2 books a week. So I had to run a gang of people. They didn't read, so they all borrowed books. So that meant I got 6 or 7 books a week, which my brothers read, etc. But I'm the only one who writes fiction. That's the way it goes. Yeah. That kind of feeds into. I think, yeah, you need. I have a huge admiration for people who come into writing when they don't have the advantages that Marti and I think Navin, you two have of growing up where people around you are reading, and for them, I have enormous, enormous admiration is all I can say.
Thank you, Amal. Navin, would you like to share something as a parting note, emphasizing on our viewers to join the writing retreat, of course?
Yes, Saguna. Uh, just a small note about I and Amal talking in case like due to COVID restriction or in case if you had to postpone the residency, we're thinking of doing that in October. So we'll do in consent with Saguna and the bOOkaholics team. So just wanted to share this with the viewers. And as I said that Marti, my guru, she's got a dragonfly girl recently come out. So I would like maybe, uh, request bOOkaholics, to do some sessions in Nepal. And she's, I don't have to say anything about her. This is the 8th novel. And other than that, I want to thank everybody and Saguna, bOOkaholics team, Ganeshji behind, was doing work at the back. And I would love to see you all at the residency. And before going, I'll just read a small poem dedicated to you all, if I have the permission. So, is it okay with the time? Yeah, okay.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, I've shared this poem with Marti as well. So, in the dark, sitting by the window in Berlin, the yellow laburnum trees brightly lit on the pavement, I think of home. It is night in Nepal. And in my house on the backyard, my mother has planted cucumber, pumpkin, chilies, and maize. They grow in the dark. The cauliflower rises to the sky in a dull embrace. The beans curl up the bamboo lattice a millimeter at a time. By the time my neighbor's cock crows in the morning, the colors from the fields will have silently entered the roses. The papaya sweetens. So many things grow in the night, in the absence. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Navin. Didn't I say you are so nostalgic? You're so nostalgic all the time. Thank you very much. Marti, would you like to share a few words?
Just to say thank you very much for inviting me on, and that it is such a pleasure to be among you. I have such respect for Amal and for Navin and for everybody who is bringing out new writers, writing themselves, and helping those of us writing to get our word out. So bless you and thank you.
Thank you very much. So should we part because there are no questions? So I think it's time that we take a leave. Thank you very much once again, all three of you. It has been a wonderful experience having you here virtually with us. And we're looking forward to Mist and Mountain's creative writing workshop in Nepal in June. I hope the viewers today have many things to take away from this talk. And I'm sure there will be few interested ones who would be joining us in June. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much, for being here with us. Thank you.